Come on a journey to lost civilizations. See ancient artifacts and long-lost ancient scrolls.
The strange writing on this clay brick is known as cuneiform. Now, the script...
Hear international presenter Gordon Gossett and travel with him to ancient Babylon and the island of Patmos to discover how ancient mysteries reveal the future.
I want to welcome you in the audience and those that are watching on screen to our series called Ancient Mysteries Reveal the Future. This is a series of audio-visual presentations where we look at ancient texts, we look at archaeology, we look at university history, and we see that some very ancient mysteries can reveal a very real future for us here today. In fact, these mysteries will reveal your future. Tonight's program is very pertinent to each one of us. It's called Today, Tomorrow, and You. You may have heard the term New World Order. Lots of people are talking about a global New World Order. George Bush, President of the United States, Winston Churchill, Vladimir Putin, on the other side of the political ideology, also has been talking about a New World Order. But the Bible talks about a global New World Order. In this global New World Order is a threefold allegiance and a unification of entities, of powers. The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. The false trinity, if you like. And they're seeking global worship or allegiance. It's not about political dominion, not about political domination. It's about allegiance and worship. It's a spiritual global world order. We read it in Revelation, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. So they worshipped the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast. He, that's the land beast, causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. So we see, friends, it's all about worship. This land beast brings about worship of the sea beast. And if we worship the sea beast, by default, we're actually giving our allegiance and worship to the dragon. So this beast that comes from the sea, I want to have a look at that beast, this beast. It's a composite beast. John says, now the beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear. And the mouth, he has the mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and his great authority. If you're familiar with Daniel 7, and we looked at it in a previous presentation, you'll remember that there's these four beasts. And what do the beasts represent? Yeah, that's right. The beasts represent these nations that would rise up. The lion. The lion, of course, yes, it's Babylon. Babylon, followed by Medo-Persia, represented by this bear raised up on one side, a twofold empire. One is more powerful than the other, and there's three ribs in the mouth. Some of you may remember what those three ribs represent. Those three ribs represent the three nations, the three empires that were conquered by the Medes and the Persians so that they could gain dominion of that part of the world. That's, of course, Babylon and Egypt and Lydia. And Medo-Persia was conquered by the leopard with four heads, Greece. That's right. And then the dragon represents Rome. I just want us to have a look at this picture for a moment. Imagine here I am, I'm Daniel, 600 years before Christ, and I'm looking up through history and prophecy. What do I see first? I see the contemporary nation, which is Babylon. And then following over, after that, looking into the future, I see the Medes and the Persians coming. And then I see Greece. And then I see this dragon-like beast, this nondescript, this terrible beast. When John the Revelator on the Isle of Patmos was writing, he was down here in history. He was at this point. He's in the time of the dragon. And what does he see, friends? He sees a beast like a leopard. It had the feet of a bear, and it had the mouth of a lion. And the dragon, the contemporary beast, gave this composite beast his power and his seat and his great authority. Do you see that, friends? That one is looking back through history. John's looking back through history and he sees these nations. When Daniel's looking forward through history, he sees these nations outlined as they will come. John sees them as they've already come. So it's a composite. This beast, this sea beast, is a bit of all of those that have gone before. We see that it's the same power that was identified by the little horn in Daniel 7. What was that, friends? What is that little horn? It's the medieval church with its headquarters at Rome. What we know as the Dark Age church. There's 6 identifying characteristics of the sea beast that we need to look at. Number 1, it arose in a populated area of the earth. For we know that the water represents what? Yeah, it's a populated area. It's a area of dense population. In Revelation 13 it says, he came out of the sea. The sea, the waters represent peoples, multitudes, nations and tongues, Revelation 17:15 tells us. Very clear. So sea, waters represent an area of large population. And the medieval church, did it arise in an area of large population? Clearly, it arose in Europe. It arose in Europe, one of the most densely populated parts of the world in those days. Number 2, ancient Rome gave the Church of Rome its power. We see that very clearly. Revelation 13:2 says, the dragon gave him his power, his seat, and his great authority. The dragon always uses fronts. Remember our description of the black corner over here and the red corner over here in this battle that's waging? Well, the black corner doesn't just front up as itself. It always works through fronts. The devil always works through some other entity to keep his real identity hidden. He worked through a snake, remember, in the Garden of Eden. And he worked through ancient Rome in Revelation chapter 12. It was a Roman official that tried to kill the baby Jesus, King Herod. We looked at him when we went to Masada. A Roman governor condemned Jesus. Roman soldiers crucified Jesus. Roman soldiers guarded his tomb. Labianca says, to the succession of the Caesars came the succession of the pontiffs in Rome. So what happened is the civil state, the political state of Rome, pagan Rome, gave every bit of power to the church. Let's not forget, friends, that the Pope is only the bishop of a city. He's the bishop of one city, similar to the bishop of Auckland, to the bishop of Tokyo, but he claims preeminence over the church. Now, if it had to do anything to do with numbers of people in your diocese, then clearly the head bishop in the world should be the bishop of Mexico City or Tokyo or even New York, the megalopolis on the eastern seaboard of America. But the Church of Rome claims preeminence. When Constantine left Rome, Labianca said, he gave his seat to the pontiff. We look at history. What happened? Constantine, who was the Caesar, you've heard of Julius Caesar and Caesar Augustus and Caligula, Titus, all these great Caesars. Well, Constantine was simply one of the Caesars of Rome. And he moved to the area which we now know as Turkey, to the city of Istanbul, but in his day, he called it Constantinople. Who do you think he named it after? Obviously a very proud man, but when he left, he didn't leave some generals behind with the authority. He didn't look at the local government to have the authority. He gave the power completely to the church. Stanley, in his book on history, page 40, says, the popes filled the place of the vacant emperors of Rome, inheriting their power, prestige, and titles from where? From paganism, friends. Stanley just says it as it is. It's from paganism. The church didn't only inherit their power and their prestige, we're going to see they inherited paganism from the pagans as well. Third point, it would rule for 1,260 years. He was given authority to continue 42 months. How do we get 1,260 years from 42 months? I hear you asking. Well, it's very simple. The biblical month was 30 days. All the months were the same length, 30 days. If you multiply 30 days by 42 months, that gives you 1,260 days. And applying the day for a year principle, we know that to be true. All denominations abide by that principle, some in spite of what they would claim, but they all acknowledge the day for a year principle. So in the book of Ezekiel, Numbers 14:34, we have references telling us that the day for a year principle is applicable, and we know that it works. It's adopted by, as I say, by all churches. So 1,260 days is 1,260 years. Does that fit? Well, what we know, friends, is that 3 of the nations that came out of the divided Rome attacked the empire. And the Bishop of Rome, the Pope, was kept captive in his own castle by the Ostrogoths in the year 538 AD. The Emperor Justinian, who was the next Caesar, ruling from the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople, he sent his general Belisarius, and he destroyed the Ostrogoths. He rescued the Pope. He genocided that third nation. They were completely wiped out. And he was given the authority, Belisarius was given the authority to give to the Bishop of Rome totalitarian power in Western Europe. That is an amazingly impossible event in history. And yet, friends, the Bible predicted it with unerring accuracy. So if we go from 538, you add 1,260, that gives you 1798. If nothing happened in 1798, friends, we may as well give up on this book. For the 7 times God gives us that time period in Daniel and Revelation. 7 times he tells us how long the medieval church would rule. 1,260 years. If nothing happened, friends, then we may as well not trust anything that this book says. But something did happen. In 1798, at the end of the 1,260 years of domination, another emperor by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte of France, he sent another general called Berthier. He went down and he didn't deliver the Pope this time. He took him captive and he died in captivity the following year in Valencia. 4th identification mark is this entity would persecute God's people. It was granted him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, it says in Revelation 13, verse 7. Did the church persecute? Friends, what ISIS is doing today is like a playground squabble compared to what the church did to millions, yea, tens of millions of people, scores of millions of people through the Dark Ages. They persecuted, that's without question. It would receive a deadly wound. Revelation says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded. 538, we said, Justinian gave the Pope political power, and in 1798 he received a deadly wound. And the world rejoiced, friends. The world rejoiced because they said the papacy's over, that tyrant that has dominated us and tortured us and scammed us out of all of our money is gone. Pope Pius VII, the next pope, referred to this event. It was Pope Pius VI that was taken captive. Pope Pius VII referred to this event in his correspondence as a deadly wound. He said, we have suffered a deadly wound. It was contemporary for him. He said, we are in a wounded state. Garibaldi was involved in a revolution in 1866 to 1870 in Italy. Garibaldi used the power of the papacy. He used them when it suited him. He used them, he aligned himself with them, and he spoke favourably towards them. But towards the end, he had a change of tune. Under his regime, the Church of Rome was stripped of many of her vast lands. The Pope, in reality, became a prisoner in the Vatican. And Garibaldi said, the papacy, being the most harmful of all secret societies, ought to be abolished. Garibaldi said that. You might say, but there was nothing secret about the church. There's nothing secret about that church. It's not a secret society. Well, it might masquerade as a church, but it is very much a secret society, and Garibaldi had insights into that. People were proclaiming, it's the end of the Church of Rome. They were rejoicing, but the deadly wound, we're told, would be healed. And when his deadly wound was healed, what does it say? All the world marveled and followed the beast. If you don't believe Bible prophecy, if you want to refute Bible prophecy, then just show me that the whole world's not hanging on every word that the Pope says today. That the Pope's just a non-entity. During Bill Clinton's tenure as President of the United States of America, they took a picture of Bill Clinton. They took a picture that we would recognise as a picture of Jesus Christ, and they took a picture of Pope John Paul II. And they took it round all the isolated parts in the world. Of those three people, who do you think was the most recognised? President of the United States, Jesus Christ, or the Papa? People in developing countries that have no knowledge of Christianity. No Christianity whatsoever. Didn't know who Jesus was. Didn't know who Bill Clinton was, but they knew who the Pope was. The most identifiable figure in the world today. All the world marvelled and followed the beast. That's where we're living today, friends. San Francisco Chronicle had a headline that said, the mortal wound was healed. Because in 1929, Benito Mussolini, the leader of the Italian forces during the Second World War, he was part of the Axis forces with Adolf Hitler. He signed a concordant with the then Pope, a man by the name of Gaspari. He signed the concordant of Mussolini, and he gave back to the church her lands, her power, her prestige, and her political immunity, if you like. And the Vatican became an independent country inside Italy. In all of our life, we've always known the church to be that, but before your parents' or grandparents' time, before their birth, the papacy didn't have that power. It was given back in the year 1929. That's not so far ago. It's not even 100 years ago. Was the deadly wound healed? Absolutely. Does all the world marvel after the beast? Well, let's have a look. The first 12 years of Pope John Paul II's reign, this was the first Polish pope. His name was Karol Wojtyła. He replaced a pope by the name of Albino Luciani. He was the pope that was only in office for 31 days. And I'm sure I can say this. There's three types of people that will never be pope, that they can't have as pope. One is a woman. There'll never be a woman pope. One is a dark person. And the third is a Christian. You can't actually have a Christian as a pope because the two don't fit together. Albino Luciani was a Christian. He was a Christian man who, when he realised how much money they had, realised he could solve all the world's housing, all the world's lack of education problems, the world's food problems. He could feed, clothe and educate the world and house the world. And he was going to do that. He took Bishop Paul Marcinkus captive. He was a prisoner in the Vatican, about to hand him over to Interpol. Bishop Paul Marcinkus was the head of Vatican finances, the world's number one most wanted man. Albino Luciani was going to hand him over. Bishop Cody in Chicago had been involved with the mafia. He put him under house arrest to hand him over as well. Albino Luciani lasted 31 days. And somebody bought him a cup of tea. And that was the end of Albino Luciani. He was replaced by Pope John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, this Polish pope. And this Polish pope did away with all of the reforms of Albino Luciani. He reinstated Bishop Paul Marcinkus, who could never leave the Vatican. He reinstated Bishop Cody. The one thing he kept in place was the review of Vatican finances. Albino Luciani wanted to know how much money we've got so we can see how much good we can do. This man continued that review of finance to see how they could bolster their finances. And it was during his reign that they told the world how poor they were and they needed more money. But during his reign, he visited 90 nations. He was seen or heard by how many people? 3.5 billion people. This man had 1 million people visit him in Australia at one event. That's bigger than the Rolling Stones, friends. This is the big event. This man. 28 million people in the Philippines. The biggest gathering of people to hear a person speak in the history of the world. 28 million people. All gathered as he toured through the Philippines. This guy's a rock star. He became a global political power. 176 nations have diplomatic relations with the Vatican. How many countries have an ambassador that goes and has an office with the Archbishop of Canterbury, the head of the Anglican Church? I can tell you that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has diplomatic connections with no nations. We're there for the betterment and the uplifting of all nations, but we don't have diplomatic connections. They have ambassadors of 176 nations there. Political leaders continually come and kowtow to the Pope. This is a church leader, friends. What's he got to do with the political leaders of the world? But the Bible predicted this would be the case. Kurt Waldheim, he was a former US Secretary General. A former US Secretary General. He said, "This is one of my greatest experiences." What was he talking about? Meeting the Pope. The Journal for the Diplomatic Corps, a book called Foreign Policy, talking about papal foreign policy, said he had the most activist papacy in modern history. Not since the Middle Ages can a comparatively broad conception of papal activity be found. The Vatican acts like a state, but not simply a state. Not simply a state, beyond a state. The state that other states look to. Can the Bible be trusted, friends? Nobody could luck that. Nobody could predict with such accuracy such an event as this, that a religious organisation would have the amour of the world. That the world would look to be the harbinger of peace when there's a problem going on in the world. When there's a problem, people talk, they ask the Pope, what does he think on the topic, no matter who's at war with who. In Secular Eyes, this is written by Malachi Martin, The Keys of This Blood. He's a former Jesuit priest. He said, in secular eyes, the Roman Church stands alone. The Pope is by definition the world's first fully fledged geopolitical leader. Did you just hear that? The world's first fully fledged geopolitical leader. Across the globe, a global power, global religious power. But more than that, more than just a political power, it's a religious power. The Pope called the Assisi Prayer Summit. And people gathered from all different religions. There was 160 leaders and representatives of divergent religious groups. There was Jews and Muslims. And I want to tell you, if you want to have a wild party, get some Jews and Muslims in the same room. Get them round the table together and see how long it remains peaceful. But they had Jews and Muslims there. They had Buddhists and Sikhs. You want to create an argument in India? Just get some Buddhists and some Sikhs in the same room and see what happens. But the Pope managed it. There was Anglicans and Orthodox. Sat in meetings with pastoral fraternities, and one dear old father from the Orthodox Church. It's like red rag to a bull with the other seemingly Orthodox churches. There was Reformed churches. There was a World Council of Churches. Pentecostals were there. Baptists were there. Everybody was there, friends. Because he snaps his fingers and they all dance. Why is that? Why is it that the Pope can organise something and people who are arch enemies can all come together? Because the Bible said it would happen. This is a struggle to read this. when you understand the Reformation. But Runcie says this, for the universal church, he's speaking for all of us. Please don't speak for me. I'm not part of what he's talking about. The universal church, I renew the plea. Could not all Christians come to reconsider the kind of primacy that's totalitarian domination, is what that word means, the Bishop of Rome exercised within the early church? A presiding of love for the sake of the unity of the churches and the diversity of their mission. Did you just hear that? This is the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Anglican Church. He said, shouldn't we return to that primacy, that dominion, that totalitarian rulership the Bishop of Rome had? And he calls it a presiding of love. Tell that to those burnt at the stake. Tell that to those disemboweled. Tell that to those tortured. Tell that to those that were genocided. It was presiding of love. I don't think so. Neither does someone else. This man writes, like the falling of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the possibility that the Catholic Church of the English, now the Catholic Church of the English is what we might know as the Church of England or the Anglican Church. That's what he's referring to. The Catholic Church of the English might finally come home to Rome in my lifetime was paralyzing. This is an earthquake. The dead end of the Reformation is now apparent. The dead end of the Reformation. The Reformation has been seen as a mistake made by churches to flee the persecution. The Protestant Reformation, let's go to the Lutheran Church now. What do they say about the Protestant Reformation? And let's not forget, the Lutheran Church is named after their founder, a man called Martin Luther. He said, I cannot retract what I've said. I can stand only on the Word of God alone. And to do so is dangerous and not convenient. He said, I stand on the Word of God alone. I can do no other, so help me God. He put his life on the line. The Lutherans today say the Protestant Reformation was meant as a movement for reform within the one holy apostolic church. The moment has come when we must say that the denunciations at the time of the Reformation are no longer valid. I'm pleased we talked about the state of the dead, because if Martin Luther could see that, if he was in heaven looking at that, it wouldn't be a pleasant place for him to be, would it? To see what his church is doing and what they're saying today. Let's all just come back together with Rome. Rome is foremost in leading to unity, to unification. If, friends, they were calling us to biblical unity, I probably wouldn't have so much problem with it. I probably wouldn't have any issue with listening to what they've got to say. But it's not biblical Christianity, is it? What is it that they got? They inherited everything from paganism. Can you see anything pagan in this picture? What about that? The cross that he carries. What's on the cross? It's an emaciated, pitiful-looking man. Is Jesus on the cross? Is Jesus on the cross? Where is Jesus today? He's at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens. But the church has him where? Right where Luciferianism and paganism has him. As a defeated little being on a cross. Defeated. This is a sign of Luciferian conquest right there. Carried by the so-called leader of Christianity in the world today. That's abysmal, friends. And you'll notice that the cross is bent down as well. The arms of the cross are bent down. If you join a Satanist group or a Luciferian group, Part of your initiation is to be in the arms of the cross down. That is direct paganism. And the hat is the hat of Dagon. It's a fish head. Then comes along Pope Francis. And Pope Francis has this conference where he goes to the Holy Lands. He goes to Jerusalem. And with this cry that they may be one. Kenneth Copeland, Joel Osteen, Protestant leaders, apparent Protestant leaders have honoured this man. We thought Pope John Paul II was the rock star. This guy has superseded him already. In fact, Pope Francis made it to the cover of Rolling Stone magazine. What's he got to do with that? Some of you, I hope you don't know what Rolling Stone magazine is. I used to subscribe to it. It's a rock music magazine. This guy is a real rock star. There was a song out by Dr. Hook, we've got all this money, we've got everything we want, but we can't get on the cover of the Rolling Stone. The Pope of Rome is on the cover of a rock music magazine. Why, friends? Because the whole world is wondering after the beast. Do you see that? Do you see the Bible was correct in its predictions? Accurate, 100% accurate in its predictions. All the world marveled and followed the beast. Well, let's go to the beast from the land now. That's the first beast. I want to go to the second beast. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spoke like a dragon. I put it to you that that's the Protestant United States of America. And we've got 5 identifying characteristics. First of all, it arises in a relatively unpopulated area. I saw the beast coming up out of the earth, the opposite of water. Seas or waters, regions of large population. The earth would be the opposite, an area of quite sparse population. Let's have a look at the history of the United States. When the Pilgrim Fathers arrived, there was 1 million, they estimate 1 million Native Americans spread throughout the entire country of the United States of America. By 1776, there was 3 million people. That's a rapid growth, isn't it? That's 3 million immigrants that arrived. It arises around 1798. Then, as the first beast is receiving its deadly wound, the other one's rising up out of the earth. As one power's going down, another's rising on time. He sees the sea beast going into captivity, and this other beast is rising up. One nation fits that description, friends. The colonies were established in North America in 1620. US War of Independence, when they got their independence, was won in 1783. 1798, 1783. 1789, the US Constitution was formed. Do you see a nation rising as another's going down? One beast going down, the other's coming up. It became a global and political superpower. It says he, referring to the second beast, he causes everybody to receive a mark on their right hand or on their foreheads, and that no one may buy or sell except the one who has the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. We're going to go into that in more detail later, that number, that magical number 666. But it became an economic superpower. It became global and political. The Time magazine in 1999, as the millennium came to a close, this is at the end of the last century, and at the end of the last millennium, we read here, no other nation has exercised such military, economic, diplomatic, and cultural reach since. America bestrides a world like a colossus. People, only God could have predicted that. They didn't even know that the continent of America existed, but God identifies it. The book that changed my life, The Great Controversy, it's a little book that I'd like to share with you all as we come to the close of our program together. I want you to read this book. In that book, written in 1888, it states on these prophecies that the United States of America was going to become the dominant nation on the planet. The dominant nation on the planet. It would cause all the world to come into line. Well, I want to ask you, what was America like in 1888? They've not long been through their civil war. Some places are still fighting Indians. But based on this prophecy, the book written in 1888 says they're going to dominate the world. Jump forward to the First World War. Was America a dominant nation in the First World War? Britain, France, and Belgium. Belgium? Most kids have never heard of Belgium. They don't know where it is. But Belgium had a bigger army than the United States. Come on, friends, it's going to dominate the world. And people poo-pooed the interpretation of the prophecy identifying the United States of America in the year 1914, 15, 16, 17 and 18, the First World War. Come the Second World War, what happened? America rose to prominence. We're free because America joined the Second World War. We're free because America stepped in and America dropped some bombs, and America, did it become the world's most powerful nation on the earth? It's not a hard thing for us to understand, is it? But 2,000 years ago, before they even knew the land existed, God identified the United States of America. But the worst thing is it's going to join forces with the first beast. Time magazine wrote an article called The Holy Alliance. This is about how Ronald Reagan worked with Karol Wojtyła, working through the shipyards in Poland, brought in Solidarność and Glasnost and Perestroika, and they broke down broke down communism. That was a power play between the leader of the United States of America, the second beast, and the leader of the first beast, Karol Wojtyła. Is that an amazing fulfillment of prophecy? He exercises all the authority of the first beast in his presence and causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast whose deadly wound was healed. America, we're told, is going to cause the world to worship the Roman Catholic Church. How's it going to do that? How's it going to do it, friends? Through a so-called Holy Alliance. It's going to bring about a connection between church and state. It's going to bring about a forced teaching of Catholic doctrines, not biblical doctrines. This picture, in some ways, surprised the world, but it was an earth-shattering event for those of us who understand prophecy. Here we have, at the funeral of Karol Wojtyła, or John Paul II, we have three presidents of the United States, both George Bushes, Bill Clinton, and to the right we have Condoleezza Rice, who was the then Secretary of State of the United States of America. What are they doing at a funeral of a church leader? I can tell you the presidents of America don't turn up if one of our pastors die. I'm not expecting them at my funeral, but here they are. Why? Because prophecy is being fulfilled before our very eyes. He makes an image of the beast, and he deceives those who dwell on the earth. This is the second beast, by those signs which he was granted to do in the sight of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image. What's an image? It's a photograph. It's a direct copy, isn't it? If I was to take a photograph of Noel, and I said, this is a picture of my daughter, you can look at it and go, no, it's not. The image has to be the same, doesn't it? So what America's going to do is going to create a mirror image, a reflection of the Roman Catholic Church. The Bible prophecy told us that. Can we trust that? Everything else has been fulfilled. It's actually doing that today. It's making an image. And that we should make that image to the beast who was wounded by the sword and live. We are the ones to make the image. America's not going to force it upon us. It's going to be made by the people. America and Rome are going to combine. And the war between church and state is going to be torn down. Church and state separation gave America and you and I what we have today: religious freedom, our freedom to worship according to the dictates of our conscience. It gave civil freedom. People were able to choose their political leaders. They were able to say what they wanted without fear of retribution. There was a freedom that came through America. That wall of separation between church and state is a metaphor based on bad history. Who would say something like that, friends? Who would say something like that? That was the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. We're in trouble when the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is calling the separation of church and state a metaphor based on bad history. And as they come together, this growing bond between Rome and Protestant United States of America, we see it taking place in the halls of justice, the halls of governance. The US Supreme Court judges, over the time that court has existed, they've had 213 judges or justices. And of the 213, how many were Roman Catholics? It's not a big percentage, friends. Only 13 out of 213. In 1994, there was a Protestant majority with one Catholic. 2009, we have now moved to 6 Catholics with one Protestant. Do you see a swing there? Do you see a massive change? By 2010, there's 6 Catholics, 3 Jews, and no Protestants. September 24th, 2015, the first Pope to address the joint meeting of Congress was Pope Francis. John Bonar here, this guy here, he was a Speaker of the House. He said he was a Roman Catholic. He said, "What a day, what a moment for our country." I agree with that. What a moment for your country, John. What a huge moment. But I'm saying what a moment from a different perspective than John Bonar was saying. He said, "I'm so proud that so many came to greet the Pope here at our capital, the world's greatest symbol of democracy. The Holy Father's visit is surely a blessing for all of us." John Bonar resigned as Speaker of the House following the achievement of his greatest goal, to get the Bishop of Rome, a church leader, to speak to the House of Congress of the most powerful nation on the earth. What a fulfillment of prophecy. Tell your friends, all of this tells me that the King is coming. We're almost home. There's serious implications for the growing bond between Rome and Protestant United States of America. I meet people in their daily lives who are fearful. People are fearful, friends, of the Muslims. They're fearful of the Chinese. They're fearful of ISIS. Friends, we do not... If you're in their locale, you'll probably want to be a bit cautious if ISIS is down the road. But friends, who the world needs to fear is the Protestant Christians of the United States of America making an image to the beast and wanting to enforce that upon the rest of us. All the world marvelled and followed the beast. So they worship the dragon who gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast. He, the land beast, causes the earth and those who dwell in it to worship the first beast. Who's going to cause us to worship the first beast? It's not Rome, friends. It's the American, sadly, ex-Protestants are going to do it. To worship the beast's image. And I haven't got time to go into the beast image. I ran a series of 4 sermons to identify the image to the beast. But if we worship the beast's image, then we worship the beast. And if we worship the beast, we worship who? We give our allegiance to the black corner. So today, when it comes to the New World Order, today, tomorrow and you need to decide. I need to decide, whose camp am I on? Whose camp am I in? Because to follow error is to follow the father of lies. To follow truth is to follow the one who says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." There's no middle ground, friends. People say, how can we go against the crowd? The multitude's all going one way. Well, do you know, only dead fish float downstream? Living fish swim against the current to get upstream. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names are not written in the Lamb's book of life. How do we go against the flow, friends? We need to have our name written in the Lamb's book of life. How do we get our name written in there? How do we get our name in the Lamb's book of life? It's a record of all who have accepted Christ's death. Those whose names are blotted out with the blood of the Lamb. That name's written in blood, friends. Your name's written in there, and as it's written in there, the other book's sealed shut. The book of remembrance is sealed shut. I want to have my name written in this book, don't you? John, before he was exiled to Patmos, wrote, "He who has the Son has" what, friends? He has life. He has not the Son of God, has not life. We need to accept Christ by faith. But names can be taken out of the book of life. It's not once saved, always saved. Once your name's written in there, they maybe have a blood blotting paper. There is a way that you can get your name taken out of the Lamb's book of life. How is that? If any way shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy. What's it talking about? It's talking about the prophecy from the Isle of Patmos. It's written in the book of Revelation. If anybody shall take away from the words of this book of this prophecy, God shall take away his part out of the book of life. Be very careful, friends, to take man's interpretations, to follow the teachings of men that align so closely with paganism and ignore the teachings of this book. We need to follow what this book says. So how do you keep your name in the book of the Lamb's book of life? Abide in me. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I've kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love, Jesus said on the last night of his life. We need to follow and obey Christ. We need to follow his laws of love, and we will find that we will be delivered from the slavery of sin. Delivered from the slavery of sin. Why? I love the text in 1 John 4:19. We love him because he first loved us. I want to close talking about slavery. Last year, I went and had a look at a place where slavery was prevalent. Slavery was one of the greatest curses in the last quarter of the last millennium. Well, even the last quarter of the Christian dispensation, we could say. And I went to a place called Ghana. And in Ghana was where many of the slaves were transferred to the West. The numbers are unbelievable. The amount of money involved back then is huge money in today's terms. We're talking billions of dollars. It was the biggest trade in the world, the slave trade. And the Portuguese made a fortune out of it. They were proficient at slave trading. Here I am looking at a solemn face because it was a solemn experience. This place here is the courtyard where the governor would have the new woman that were brought in march around in the courtyard, and he would choose out who he wanted to slake his lust on. And if they refused, they took us to where they were tortured. Horrific things happened. This sign here really struck me, and I had to take a photograph. It's an old sign. You may not be able to read it. I'll read it to you. In everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors, may those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this. When I went to this slave castle, it's called Elmina on the Cape Coast. When I went there, I was in the friendliest place on the earth next to Iran, I believe. These people are so friendly in Ghana. But they had school groups and university groups going through the castle. People from Ghana, maybe it was their first time. And these people who were going through and having a look at the history of their nation suddenly didn't look at me with such friendly demeanour. And it's fair to say I was the only white face that you could see with binoculars. And these young people were sitting there just glaring at me, and I made sure I kept really close with my tour guide. And I could see that there was anger and hatred in their eyes when they realised what had happened. Well, that night I had to speak to 400 Africans. I was doing a speaking tour, and I spoke to 400 African faces. And I said, with some emotion, I've been to Elmina today. And I said, and I am ashamed. But I'm not ashamed to be white. I'm ashamed to be a human being. Because I understood, friends, that the Portuguese and the Dutch went and took captives. They kidnapped people to make them slaves. That wasn't the case. When the gold and all the other things that the Portuguese and the Spanish were after, and the Dutch, When those things ran out, the people of Ghana started to trade their own people. They would sell their own sons. The chief would just select a group of men from his village and sell them into slavery. I said, I'm not ashamed to be a white person, I'm ashamed to be a human being. It was a very challenging thing what happened there. This room here with the cross above it, that was a room that you never return from. That was for the Portuguese. That was for the soldiers, for the white people. If they did something wrong, they went in that room and not one ever got out of there alive. They went out of there to their execution. It was a hideous place. And in the middle of it, they had this building. What do you think that building might be? It's the Portuguese church. So in the midst of all of that, they were worshipping God and doing this in the name of God. See it there, Portuguese church. What an abomination, friends. And the slaves would go into this room here. It was called the room of no return. The sea used to come right up to the edge of the castle here. It's receded over the years. So much for global warming. Thought the sea was rising. It's gone back a few hundred metres. But they used to go through that little gate there, and they went onto the ship, and then they would be taken to the Caribbean or to the United States, the mainland United States, and be sold as slaves. Here is a slave block. This is where they would stand and they would be bidded for. Human beings traded like merchandise. One day on the slave block, there was a young man. His name was Joel. And Joel was forced to stand on that block. And in as much English as he had learned, he said, I will not work. And they started bidding, and he said, I will not work. You do what you like, I will not work. And people weren't too keen on bidding for him, but they saw that he was strong and strapping lad, and maybe some thought, we'll break his spirit. And the bidding began. And eventually an elderly gentleman, he outbid everybody else. And Joel's yelling at him with vehemence, I will not work, I will not work. And so they took him off the block and they shackled him, they took him away to the farm. And when they got to the farm, he said to the old man, I will not work, I will never work. The old man said, I didn't buy you to make you work. He said, I bought you to set you free. And he undid his shackles. He said, you're free. Do you know what the man said? Joel said, Master, I will serve you for the rest of my life. Why? Because of love. Friends, Jesus has set every one of us free from slavery if we choose to be set free. He offers us that freedom. And when we've tasted that freedom, we say, we will serve you for the rest of our lives. I've made that decision. That's why I'm here today. And I just would encourage each one of you to make that decision as well. He bought you to set you free. Let's pray. Father, what an amazing offer. You've expended all your wealth to buy us. Not that you would own us, but that you would set us free from those who seek to own us. Satan, the false church, the image, Lord, they want to own us, but you do own us. But you set us free. Lord, I just pray for each one of us that we would accept that freedom as its profit and that we could serve you out of love for the rest of our lives. It's my prayer in Christ Jesus' name.
Well, I hope that gives you hope for a promising future. In our next presentation, we're going to be looking at something that is so relevant to every one of us. We're going to look at the topic of money. In the midst of this global economic meltdown, the GFC that we've all just experienced in the last few years, we're still coming out the tail end of it. Our program is called The Keys to Financial Security. I know everybody's interested in that. Look forward to sharing it with you.